It is challenging to cope with the idea the whole civilized world is against you. Russian propaganda does everything to fix this image. In this episode of 1 Week of Russian Propaganda, I will tell you about the countries allegedly supporting Russia's war in Ukraine. I will tell you, who are Russia's friends? One doesn't hear too much about countries openly supporting Russian invasion of Ukraine. So who are then those friends of Russia in the war?
Russian special operation, along with the majority of the world's population, is still supported by China.
Unfortunately, there were no details on any specific support measures. Perhaps buying heavily discounted Russian oil is one. When you have too few allies, you think anyone who is neutral is already good enough. It seems though that Russian propaganda should take a crash course in math when they refer to majority of population. In March, the UN General Assembly voted to condemn Russian attack on Ukraine. The resolution was passed, with 141 nations condemning Russian invasion of Ukraine, while 5 nations voting against condemning Russia. The nations voting against the resolution represent less than 3% of the world's population. If one excludes Russia itself, the percentage goes to below 1. These allies are North Korea, Syria, Belarus, and Eritrea. In April, the UN General Assembly adopted a second resolution calling for Russia to be suspended from the Human Rights Council, arguably an even more drastic measure. The resolution received a two-thirds majority of those voting. Previously, only Libya had its membership rights stripped from the body as a result of the actions of the Gaddafi regime. The nations voting against kicking out Russia represent 29% of the world's population, which is perhaps not majority, at least in my mind. And obviously not all of those actually support Russian invasion of Ukraine. One of those countries voting for kicking Russia out of Human Rights Council was Myanmar. However, propaganda decided to make Myanmar their BFF, because someone from Myanmar shopped for weapons in Moscow.
By the way, the leader of Myanmar is now in Moscow. This country has been facing aggressive policies of the collective West for 2 years now. The West is trying to overthrow legitimate government there. Myanmar votes in support of our special operation. We should get together more.
Another BFF of Russia is perhaps predictably North Korea, Russian comrade.
The one who is showing us today an example of how to pursue an independent policy is unsurprisingly Comrade Kim Jong-un in North Korea. After Kiev did not like recognition of DNR and LNR by North Korea answered very simply, "So you impose sanctions against us? What grounds do you have to condemn our decision?" This is an utter pragmatic approach to politics. Europeans need to learn from North Korea to protect their own interests.
Many Russians though have never heard of Myanmar, and support by North Korea does not sound as encouraging. To add more credibility, Russian propaganda makes Russians believe they're even supported by smart people in Europe.
In Derbry, in Belgium, residents made a demonstration in support of Russian special operation in Ukraine. People with Z symbols had a picnic in a park and then hung DPR flags on the bridge over the Urth River.
Hold on. Is that a picnic in a park? And on the table, there is obviously typical Belgian food and not something Russians would eat. Who is this guy though that is the main Russian fan in Belgium? Get to know Chris Roman, chairman of neo-Nazi geopolitical think tank Euro-Rus, promoting White Europe from Spain to Vladivostok. In 2001, the guy and his neo-Nazi friends performed Nazi salutes at a meeting and were kicked out. In 2003, he was sentenced to 9 months in prison for racism. Wasn't Russia supposed to fight neo-Nazis and not be inspired by them? Would you like to enjoy his new hit, Nostalgia for Russia? A pure masterpiece. As a reminder, you can always mute this masterpiece and watch with subtitles. Such an intense melody, guys. And that is it for today's episode. Let me know in the comments what you think. Would Russians really believe Russian invasion of Ukraine is supported in countries like Belgium? Is North Korea that practically lives in isolation really an effective success story for Russians to look up to? Thank you for watching and see you next time.